Hello everyone, welcome to From the Star Wars Library, where Star Wars is in print, the Force is with the readers, and the lighting, and in this case apparently the motion capture, just sucks. I'm your host as always, Nathan P. Butler, also of Star Wars Beyond the Films over at StarWarsReport.com and Republic Forces Radio Network at RepublicForces.com. I'm all over the place. This time we are taking a look at what amounts to the very first Star Wars Expanded Universe story ever. So far, we've taken a look back in Episode 1 at the Star Wars novelization by Alan Dean Foster that was credited under the name George Lucas. Then in Episode 2, we checked out the Star Wars adaptation for the A New Hope film, though at the time they just called it Star Wars, that was found in the first 6 issues of the Marvel Comics series by Roy Thomas. Now, we're at essentially the end, or the back quarter, of 1977. At this point, Marvel Comics has a Star Wars license, and we are still several months away from the first Expanded Universe novel, Splinter of the Mind's Eye, that often gets the credit as being the first post-A New Hope Star Wars EU story. In actuality, the first EU story would come in late 1977, and depending on which source you look at, it's a story that either ran from about September to December of 1977, or around February to April or so of 1978. It's kind of an iffy thing, because we look at publication dates and dates on individual comics. Even though dates on individual comics for a long time were specifically focused on when to take them off the shelves rather than put them onto the shelves. So we can pin it down to late 77. I'll be using the same dates that are used on my Star Wars Timeline Gold over at StarWarsFanWorks.com/timeline. In the appendices file, you'll find a Star Wars Publications in Publication Order timeline, and those are the dates that I'll be using to keep our information straight here for this series. Now we've reached Episode 3, that story that kicks off the expanded universe of Star Wars from the Marvel Comics series is often referred to as 8 for Aduba 3. It doesn't have a broader title because it's individual issues, but you'll find this story in the pages of Star Wars from Marvel Comics issues 7 through 10. Although it does continue technically after 10, it just sort of changes gears. This is a serialized tale as told through multiple issues of the comic series. At this point, the story focuses pretty much on just Chewbacca and Han Solo. Leia and Luke are in it, but they aren't in it very much. To start out with, Star Wars at that point, and I think I just held them up in the wrong order, Star Wars at that point had just finished the adaptation, number 6, the film had been out in theaters, and now we move into the first Star Wars EU comic book of all time. This is Star Wars number 7 from Marvel, New Planets, New Perils. All new. Han Solo and Chewbacca on a world the law forgot. And Han Solo saying, "Grab a laser gun, Chewie! They've got us surrounded!" And in the back you have wanted, dead or alive, Han Solo and Chewbacca, the Wookiee reward. Or Chewbacca the Wookiee reward, I guess is the better phrasing of that. This story essentially follows Han Solo and Chewbacca as they board the Millennium Falcon and they leave from Yavin 4. To use a version that's got a little bit better color here, let me grab from the Star Wars Omnibus A Long Time Ago Volume 1, which is one of the places you'll find it collected, the most recent place. They're saying their goodbyes, and Han and Chewie now have their reward for helping win the Battle of Yavin, and of course, for helping to free Leia from the Death Star. However, they don't get very far with that reward. Very quickly, they are captured by pirates. Pirates led by the infamous Crimson Jack. Yes, that's right, a man who's burly, with red hair, a red beard, a powerful-looking shirt that almost looks like it could be armor, and... are those Speedos? God, I hope not. It's him, the other pilots in his band, including a woman named Jolie. Now, essentially these pirates steal Han's reward. That's why he can't take it yet to Jabba the Hutt. The big question was, wait a second, if Han is packing up his loot at the end of A New Hope, why didn't he pay off Jabba the Hutt before the Empire Strikes Back? This attempts to give the first answer to that. Well, pirates hijacked him and took it. He's going to wind up facing Crimson Jack later. And as a side note, we should note here that when you read the upcoming novel Star Wars Scoundrels by Timothy Zahn, a lot of folks have been saying, wait a second, why is it that Han needs to take this odd job that will eventually involve Lando and others? Why is he taking this odd sort of Ocean's 11 type caper job when he should have the reward from before? How are they going to explain away why the reward is gone? Thankfully, they don't try to create a new reason. Zahn actually references back to Crimson Jack in Star Wars number 7 from Marvel. It is a brilliantly done continuity reference that doesn't need a lot of explanation because the story has already been told. Again, in this issue, they wind up essentially getting hijacked, they lose the loot, it's the first appearance of Crimson Jack and Jolie, and they wind up on Aduba 3 looking for jobs to somehow make enough money to still be able to pay back Jabba the Hutt. At this point, we move to what is sort of the more famous of the title, or the cover images of this particular storyline from 7 through 10, which is this one. It says, 8 against a world. Inside the title is 8 for Aduba 3. In this issue, the deadly mission of Luke Skywalker. It says extra because, frankly, it's not the main storyline. Starting in this issue, we see Luke go off on a mission for the Rebel Alliance. He winds up being lost, like contact is lost with him, and then later on in this particular arc, Leia goes to look for him. And as this story ends in issue 10, it kicks off to number 11, what the heck happened to Luke and Leia? So it continues on from there, while these still focus on Han and Chewie. This one has Han gathering together a group of other individuals in need of cash in order to protect local farmers, a local settlement on Aduba 3. And the 8 that get involved are a pretty motley little band, to say the least. Let's again go back to the color edition. Well, I mean, they're all color, but from a color standpoint, I mean, if you can look at the color and see how kind of washed out this color is here for 8 for Aduba 3, as opposed to the opening of the color version, or the better color version there. I mean, significantly better. Even on the webcam, you can tell a significant difference here. He gathers together his troop. They're all going up against this man, Sergi X Arrogantis, the arrogant one. Apparently, they were kind of going with Lucas having references to previous things throughout world history, and maybe went for Arrogantis to sound kind of maybe Roman, kind of Latin. Whereas we have Sergi X that kind of sounds a little more futuristic, so a blending of future and past to give us that Star Wars-y feel, perhaps. He has Hedgie as one of the members of his team down here, able to fire spikes, which is kind of cool, which almost wind up nailing Han, by the way, as you can see there on the far left-hand side of your screen. He winds up catching up with a former love interest, Amaza Foxtrain, who apparently feels that the best way to fight in a deadly conflict is to wear as little as possible. I think maybe she was a model for the Jedi in the prequels, or Ahsoka. Just saying. We also have, speaking of Jedi, believe it or not, a Jedi, or a man who considers himself a Jedi or a former Jedi. I kid you not, the character's name is Don Juan Quixote. Not Obi-Wan, but Don Juan Quixote. K-I-H-O-T-A-Y. Yes, Don Juan Quixote. There's no windmills to tilt at, though, by the way. We also wind up seeing the debut of the infamous Lepus Carnivorous, or Leppy Jackson. Also called Jax in some cases. He is a meat-eating, rocket-riding rabbit to you, Junior. Using the voice that Andrew Gilbertson used, as we'll get into momentarily. He is one of the most maligned early Star Wars characters. He looks like Captain Bucky O'Hare. He was based at least partially on the way that the character of Bugs Bunny was used in the Looney Tunes cartoons. In fact, his name is somewhat of a reference to that. So, yeah, Star Wars is kind of automatically scraping the bottom of the barrel for some ideas, but he winds up being sort of an icon of the Marvel age, for better or for worse. We also see Jim Doshan, or Jim the Star Killer Kid, a young man who reminds Han of Luke, and his droid, FE9Q, which you can't really get a good glimpse of, but you can see sort of in the back here, between Chewie's legs on the cover there. And together, this team is going to fight Sergi X Arrogantis. Only, by the time they drive off Sergi X and his minions, the local town mystic has raised this creature, this behemoth, from the world below, as it's called. So, we pick up with Showdown on a Wasteland World, the next step in the process. Keep firing, Chewie, all of you. It's do or die, because here come the Cloud Riders. That's Sergi X's men. Yeah, and it looks like it's gonna be die. Wow. Then we get Behemoth from the world below. Keep firing, Chewie. Wow. Keep firing, Chewie. And keep firing, Chewie. And grab a laser gun, Chewie. Han really wants Chewie to start firing, I suppose. Keep firing, Chewie, or this whole planet is doomed, not to mention us, the Behemoth from below. They eventually, of course, defeat the Behemoth and manage to save the town. All these characters are new, of course, because this is the first of the EU stories being produced, so all those members of the 8 for Aduba 3, except for Han and Chewie, of course, are new characters, as is Sergi X, as is, as mentioned, Crimson Jack and Jolie, as are all the members of this small community. Now, interestingly, we wind up with a changing creative team here from the standpoint of writers. Roy Thomas had written the original Star Wars A New Hope adaptation. Roy Thomas, you can see kind of down here in the corner, does wind up writing issue number 7 with Howard Chaykin as his co-plotter and his artist. We pick up with number 8. The creative team, in this case, again, stays the same. Roy Thomas, Howard Chaykin. You get to number 9. The team is still somewhat the same. Roy Thomas is still the writer and editor for Marvel. Howard Chaykin is now joined by Tom Palmer as an illustrator. By the time you get to number 10, we have the artist and co-plotter being Howard Chaykin. Tom Palmer, again, credited this time as a co-artist. And the script writer is not Roy Thomas. The script writer, if you can see it there, is Don Glut. Yes, Donald F. Glut, the same man who winds up writing the novelization of The Empire Strikes Back, got his start within Star Wars writing issue number 10 of the Marvel comic series, Behemoth from the World Below. Now, where can you find these? At this point, you can find them in the original 4 Marvel issues, 7 through 10. You can also find them in the first Marvel Comics collected trade paperback entitled Doom World, which of course was released by Dark Horse Comics when collecting this series for the first time, or as mentioned, you can find it within the classic, or the Star Wars Omnibus A Long Time Ago Volume 1. It's called Classic Star Wars for the original A Long Time Ago trade paperback series, just Star Wars Omnibus for this particular re-release that is more recent. Now, interestingly enough, there's another way you can experience this story, and I would suggest experiencing it this way while reading, or bit by bit as you read, so you get a chance to hear something really cool along with reading the comic itself, which is actually pretty good for that early era. It's an unusual story, it's kind of fun, it's adventurous, it's what you'd expect of Star Wars in a sense. Andrew Gilbertson, who's been a longtime member of the Star Wars podcasting and otherwise fan audio community, who's done a lot of work in Star Wars fan audio dramas in terms of voice work and writing, put together an audio drama, a fan-made audio drama version of this story, entitled Star Wars Marvels. You can find it at nolinescinemas.com or at starwarsfanworks.com/marvels.html. Great audio drama. I did some voices in it, so, I'm hopefully you can understand I'm saying it because it really is a good one as opposed to just me tooting it because I was in it. Great audio drama, and it has one of the best Star Wars fan audio voice actors I've ever heard playing Han Solo. A lot of folks try to emulate Han Solo. Not many people do it really well. In this case, the person who does it is Indiana Jim Perry. You might remember that I pointed out in Episode 0, this Volume 1 Preludes of the Wars, the Battle of Phobos novella series, which has my first novella in that series plus 2 others in it. One of these is by Jim Perry. It was recently released, Firefight at Overwatch Command, as an illustrated novella version from Grail Quest Books. So Jim Perry, who is part of the Wars, the Battle of Phobos novella writing series that I'm a part of, is also a fan audio producer and fan audio voice actor from time to time. He played Han Solo, and it is an excellently done role. I would put him right there with, what is his name? Perry King. The 2 Perrys, Jim Perry and Perry King, from the audio dramas that were aired on NPR. Really good Han Solo. Now, is this story something that is essential? Absolutely not, unless you're just curious about how Han lost the treasure or lost his reward. However, is it something that you can skip or should skip? It is a cutesy little story. Interesting to see how the EU started early on, but if you're really pressed for time, this is a story that you can skip. As long as you know that Crimson Jack took the reward, there's not a whole lot here that's going to affect anything in the long run, unfortunately. But at least it's an interesting start to the Star Wars Expanded Universe, which we will continue with in our next episode. Until then, as always, may the Force be with the readers.